now for my favorite topic on the Sports PSP podcast, Babyface Heel. Now, for those who may not know what Babyface Heel means in wrestling language or terminology, Babyface is a good guy, a heel is a bad guy, and a tweener is someone in between Babyface or heel. So, I come up with a list of athletes or celebrities that me and the panel, we're going to decide whether they are a Babyface, heel, or tweener. First one, The Claw, Kawhi Leonard. Tweener. He's a tweener. You can't disregard what he accomplished in San Antonio, nor what he accomplished in Toronto by winning the championship, including the game-winning Game 7 shot against the Philadelphia 76ers. Sorry, Broad. But at the same time, he doesn't have the greatest personality in the world, although I do like his laughter from time to time. Or when he says, "What it do, baby?" Tweener, because again, they look at him as the epitome of load management. He's going to come in, he's going to have an outstanding game, but you don't know whether he's going to play back-to-backs, so and so. He's not going to play an amount of games. He's probably going to miss, 20 to 25 games. And, of course, remember the situation he had earlier this season, champ, whether I think it was Pablo Torre who reported.
Pablo Torres, yeah.
Remember, Kawhi Leonard, he allegedly got paid to do nothing. Allegedly.
Yeah, a fake endorsement.
Right.
So they could circumvent the salary cap.
Right. So I look at tweener with Kawhi Leonard because he's not the type of person that you really want to hear regarding press conferences, things of that nature. Although it's kind of funny, though, when you listen to his laughter. He's not big on social media. I mean, he has the New Balance shoes. I would say tweener.
I'll say Babyface. A lot of stuff that happened throughout his career is not really his fault, with the exception of that whole situation with him and the Clippers. The injuries were not his fault about when things fell apart in San Antonio. But eventually, he ended up, I think he almost ended up suing the team doctor because of that injury. I don't really think that was his fault, the way things ended pretty badly. I just think that it's just a bad situation to where they're reserving him and having that load management because they're afraid something might crack. You'll say something might break. He hasn't been the healthiest. He hasn't been fully healthy in a good while. As far as his personality, I mean, he's not on social media. Outside, you really have to, let's just be real. You got to come up with a story in order to hear about Kawhi Leonard. You got to talk about the load management. You got to talk about, if that story would have never came out about, the team trying to circumvent the salary cap, you probably wouldn't even, guess what? What other bad things have you heard about Kawhi Leonard other than how humble he is, how he still drives that 98 Chevy Tahoe even after he got a max contract because it's paid for. You really hear about him doing things within the community, within the Los Angeles community. I really think a lot of perception of Kawhi was kind of twisted because of the commercial that we saw, the New Balance commercial. The minute that he came in, him and Paul George came to the Clippers, you saw the car key frown on it because he wanted to be the king of LA. But unfortunately, the only thing that people could really say about Kawhi is when he came to LA, as far as the Los Angeles Clippers were concerned, he didn't live up to the hype. And look, his body, you can't help, outside of keeping yourself in shape and keeping yourself in the best shape possible, you can't help how your body is going to react to certain things. I can help me not being in shape. I can't help my body betraying me. So outside of that, I understand he's the face of load management, but that's because there's look, if we play this dude back to back and try to play him every game, he's not going to make it throughout the full season. And had they known that, would they have given him a max contract? Who knows? But you really don't hear about a lot. The only thing I would say about Kawhi is he didn't live up to the hype as far as being the new king of LA, because they expected him to come in and, compete with LeBron and, open up that new stadium with a championship along with Paul George, along with a lot of other guys. They expected that, and they kind of got a popcorn fart in church when it comes to that. They made, I think, the furthest they ever made was the Western Conference Finals during the bubble,
And
and
he
then
got hurt in
and
the
he got
semifinals against the Utah Jazz, and it took every bit of Paul George, Patrick Beverly, Terrence Mann, and other players from the Clippers roster to continue.
yeah.
And
So,
remember, before that year, champ, let's not forget they blew a 3-1 lead in the bubble.
yeah, they really do. Yeah, you know, when Doc Rivers your coach, that's gonna happen.
But it wasn't just Doc Rivers, champ. Kawhi Leonard didn't also play particularly well too. Neither did Paul George.
Yeah,
And we all know Magic Lou Williams. Remember during the bubble, he made the news for Magic City.
yeah. Eat them lemon pepper wings, lemon pepper Lou. Eat
But
that lemon pepper catfish. But outside, look, like I said, you really have to find a story about Kawhi in order for you to hear about him. And
actually, I found one right here, champ. Remember the report from The Athletic
mhm,
during 2020? These were several key. I'm reading an article here. According to an investigative report by The Athletic in December 2020, several factors contributed to a perceived lack of buy in from the rest of the Clippers roster. The influence on schedule. Both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George had power over the team's practice and travel schedule. Teammates believed Leonard, in particular, was responsible for canceling multiple practices. The other, game participation. There was a belief among other players, that the two stars were able to, quote, pick and choose when they played, opting to sit out certain games or limit their playing time in the moment. Personal staff. Leonard and George were the only players on the team to have their own personal security guards and trainers. Media availability. The Stars typically did not speak to the media until at least 45 minutes after games, often citing post-game treatment or workouts. This left other players to handle the bulk of the media obligations and logistics. Leonard reportedly, who lived in San Diego, which at times led to delays in the team flights. So you could hold that against Kawhi Leonard if that report is, however, true. And
mhm,
again, even though Kawhi Leonard was coming off that championship year in Toronto, and this is his first year with the team, this is actually the first time for the Clippers to have this type of superstar. But at the same time, if you're Kawhi, you should have done your part to build chemistry with this team so that you can try to go farther. Now, that's also on the Clippers organization by giving him that much amount of power. But at the same time, when you don't live up to the expectations, and remember, champ, the Lakers, they even tried to acquire Kawhi in free agency so that there would be a possibility of a LeBron AD in Kawhi. But Kawhi chose to go on a different route to go to the Clippers. Plus, he's responsible for the Paul George trade. Remember, they traded SGA for Paul George. How's that panned out well for Oklahoma City? And especially with Sam Presti.
mhm. The new Jerry Krause of the NBA, Sam Presti. Look, hey, two LA guys that haven't lived up to the potential. So, and like I said, that's the only thing I really hold against them because you were supposed to be. Look, you were supposed to be because they was talking about them being the new Jordan and Pippen at
Yes,
one point,
as far as what they do on the defensive side of the
defensive and the
court,
offensive side. So you were
especially
supposed to
defense.
be that. You're supposed to be that, but you come, like I said, come find out you were the popcorn fart in church. That's the main thing I hold against them. But it's not enough for me to put you in a tweener situation. It is not enough for me to even put you in a heel conversation. Your body has betrayed you. I get it. You're the face of load management. I get it because everybody's looking at the fact that you might get hurt the minute you go out there. The minute you go out there, everybody's holding their collective breath. It's like, is this going to be the game? Is that going to be the game? And these are just minor injuries that he suffered. It's not. It's not like it's like a. It's like it's like a broken leg or something like that. These are injuries that he's basically have been able to come back from. But when you think about a lot of things that he's been through as far as injuries is concerned, and still been able to get contracts, that's more of an indictment on the organization than it is on him. Because if I know a guy hasn't been doing anything as far as being on the court, then guess what? Why am I going to get him an extension? I'm not.
Right, but you can also hold this on Kawhi too, because again, if the injury is not as severe, you do realize that the fans, they don't get an opportunity to see you play every single time though.
Yeah, I
And
like I
again,
said,
yeah, and they waste their hard-earned money, and they may not get their money back.
absolutely. I agree with that.
Now, if the
But
injuries are legitimate, then we understand.
yeah, enemies. What about enemies? Injuries are legitimate. I understand. I understand. But a lot of, like I said, you can't control injuries. And I don't know how many of those are legitimate and how many of those are the teams kind of resting you in order to make sure that you're not hurt. I don't know. So, I mean, so many lies and stuff come out about the press, about teams each and every day, about them feigning injuries. So I don't know which ones are legit. And I don't know. I'm just going to, if I don't know which ones and I don't know for sure, then guess what? I have to go by the report. And if the report says you're hurt, then you're hurt. I can't argue with that if I don't know the facts. I don't have a source within that organization saying, well, he's not hurt. So I can't blame him for his body not betraying him. Can I blame him for a lot of other stuff? Yeah. Trading SGA, who became a league MVP and probably the new face of the NBA. Yeah, in order to get Paul George, who kind of peaked in Indiana, if you really want me to be honest with you. Really didn't do a lot when he went to Oklahoma City. In my humble opinion, he peaked in Indiana during the LeBron era. Yeah.
I can understand them getting Paul George at the time because of what Paul George was younger, defensive player. I don't think anyone expected much from SGA champ. And then on top of that, Paul George's ability to move off the ball and catch and shoot in situations from time to time. So that would have looked well, but at the same time, and I love Kawhi's game. Great mid-range shooter. He's 6'7", 230. Huge, freakish hands.
Yeah.
Freakish hands. You seen his hands, champ, especially with Shaq's? They're
Yeah, the
huge.
claw. They call him the claw
Yo,
for a
they call him
reason.
the claw for a reason. Back-to-back defensive player of the year. But I lean towards tweener. I'm not gonna call him a babyface, but I can't necessarily call him a heel because he was productive and playoff. When he's in playoff time, boy, he's a different animal.
Yes, indeed.
All right, the next one, I think this one is pretty unanimous for babyface. Max Kellerman.
Oh man, I love Max Kellerman, man. Babyface.
You
Through
said
it
it
through.
yourself. He's the only person that if anybody has a chance attacking Stephen A. Smith, is him. Because we've heard a lot of people.
Yes. Max Kellerman, man, look. I love hearing Max Kellerman when it came to boxing. Boxing, I believe if he would have stuck with boxing, he would have been like the next Burt Sugar. Because his boxing expertise, seeing him interview boxers on HBO and seeing how he was in the thick of it on
Him
HBO.
and Jim Lampley.
Yes, him and Jim Lampley. Those were the cornerstones of HBO boxing, him and Jim Lampley. So, and not to mention, he brought a good little flavor when he went to First Take, regardless of if Stephen A liked him on First Take or not. I will never forget when he brought up when I don't think the younger generation understand the significance of him bringing up the Last Dragon when he said, "Who is the master?" And he said, "You say show enough, the Last Dragon." I
Show
remember
enough.
show enough. So, Bruce Leroy, but I
And
love
he's
Max
also
Kellerman.
a rapper too, for those who may not know. Max Kellerman used to
Yeah, I
rap.
didn't find that out until recently. So hey, he's knowledgeable. He has the flavor in order to do that. And look, the only bad take that you can really say about Max Kellerman is he is gonna fall off a cliff. I think that was
No,
one of the
no, there's more.
there's a
Remember,
few more, but that one was the main one. He is gonna fall off a cliff. So
but that and what he said, Kawhi Leonard, better player under pressure than Kobe.
yeah, that too. But that was the GOAT conversation was the main one. But he's done a lot of his outrageous takes. You got to remember that journalism has changed. We're not in we're not in the sports business anymore. We're in the story business. But Max Kellerman, nothing malicious about it. You know, And like I stated, if it was anybody that has a reason to speak out against Stephen A. Smith, because Stephen A. has openly admitted to getting Max ousted off the show, it's Max Kellerman, but he hasn't. He's went on, moved on to bigger and better things. And Max is a smart man, and his intelligence, his swag, his aura is, like I stated, he's a little, quirky, but not so much where it's cringy. He has that little nerdiness to him, but it's not so to the point where he's cringy. Which nothing wrong with being a nerd. Look at my wall. So just being real, I like Max Kellerman, man. Undisputed babyface, man. Smart, elegant, smooth, got flavor to him, nerd, able to relate to anybody. Remember what T.O. said, when he stood up for him when he was on the show with Stephen A.
I'm in
Smith.
the streets. Max almost seems blacker than you.
Yeah, so yeah.
Just looking at Max Kellerman's reaction when T.O. said that,
He damn near cringed if you really want like, ooh. But and
he,
plus, he was one of the first people to come out and said that he would never say the name of the old Washington Commanders name.
I was going to
He
bring
refused.
that up.
He refused to. Great minds think alike as usual, genius. But yeah, he was the first one to say I'd never say that name, and we had a discussion about that not too long ago. But
Yeah, I
but
mean, go say that to a Native American reservation and see where that end up.
yeah, and watch you get gutted. So, which rightfully so, you walk on there saying that word. It's kind of like you come into our community saying certain words. Yes, FA FO. Be my guest. Be my guest.
Babyface, brilliant, smart brother. First take would be a lot better if Max Kellerman would be back because I loved how Max Kellerman challenged Stephen A. Smith. Remember he talked about marijuana a lot and brought up the scientific information because Stephen A. Smith constantly would say, "Stay off the weed." But Max Kellerman brought historical context, the both alcohol and cannabis. Back in the 1930s, champ, they were both prohibited. Alcohol was lifted. But then he brought up Harry S. Anslinger, who was like the godfather of drugs. He invented fake science to make false claims about marijuana. He would say the darker races feel like they're as equal as the white man if they use the stuff. You smoke a joint,
Yeah.
you're likely to kill your brother or your sister. Max Kellerman also, plus, to Marcellus Wiley's point, he did say this. Now, he didn't say Max is blacker than Stephen A. Smith, but there's one thing I do agree with Marcellus Wiley on this. Max understood more about black culture. Max Kellerman went to the University of Columbia, same as Marcellus Wiley. Highly smart, highly sophisticated. Obviously, boxing, when it comes to boxing, picking out X's and O's, analyzing, can we name anyone better than Max Kellerman?
No, especially when they're boxing, man. Like I said, the cornerstone of HBO boxing was him and Jim Lampley, man.
Yeah,
That was beautiful, especially during the when Floyd Mayweather and when they started doing the 24/7 doing the Oscar De La Hoya fights.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he was the one, and then still remember the interview he did with Manny Pacquiao post fight against Mayweather, and Manny said, "I won the fight," and like everyone else, Max Kellerman asked him, "You thought you won the fight? How?" And Max Kellerman was dumbfounded when Manny said that because he felt like, Manny, you lost that fight. You connected on 19% of your punches during that match against Floyd Mayweather. And when I look at Max Kellerman, smart brother, brilliant brother. By the way, he has often called out James Dolan. He said he will never go to a Knicks game again. He'll never support the New York Knicks because he finally came to the realization that he can't support this team because of Dolan. And look, to your point, champ, he said it. Look, he is no fan of Washington because obviously the name in which they were, he was one of the few people in the media that refused to say the name. He even talked about how Native Americans gave him feathers and publicly thanking him for not using that term.
Yeah.
So Max is a deep brother, smart brother. Um, and again, he's moved on. He doesn't have to say anything negative about Stephen A, although I wouldn't mind him saying it. We've heard Michelle Beadle. We've heard Kerry Champion. Oh, we've heard Jason Whitlock. We've heard a lot of people talk smack about Stephen A. Smith. But if there's one person that legitimately that has a right to call out Stephen A. Smith is Max Kellerman. Because it was shady on the part from Stephen A. Smith to let Max out the door. And on top of that, you talked about the certain things that Max Kellerman didn't have, like such as not being a journalist. Max knew and understood sports.
Mm-hmm.
Max Kellerman brought a lot of things to the table. So, and remember, champ, he talked about a lot of things. They were going back and forth. He and Stephen A. about the Colin Kaepernick situation. Remember, this was at the time when Kaepernick had that workout with the NFL.
Yeah.
So, Babyface, I say with Max Kellerman, man, he's brilliant, he's smart, he's knowledgeable, he's fun to listen to, especially when it comes to boxing. He is fun, and he shows a more empathetic side. And I lean towards more of his politics. Hell, if Max Kellerman running for president, I would vote for him. I damn sure wouldn't vote for Stephen A. Smith.
No more celebrity politicians, man. No more celebrity politicians. Even if I'm up for president, do not vote for me. I'm a celebrity, not a damn politician.
Well, unfortunately, look, the current president said, hey, I did it. Why can't you? All right. Now, this one. He is a part of the wrestling community. This is about him as a person, not the character. Jim Cornette. Babyface. I'm sorry. He is a baby. Anytime when you take the time to go on your platform and you talk shit about Vince Russo, now I would not go as far as what you would want to do to Vince Russo. You have to go do some homework and research. But anytime when you talk smack about Vince Russo, hey, feel free. Jim Cornette is a babyface. He and I are no fans of the president. Sorry, just stating that out there.
My God.
He's
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt this segment. I apologize because I remember exactly the video you sent for what he said about the seating president. Oh, help us.
He is, as you often call him, champ, colorful. But when it comes to wrestling, two people I want to listen to. The Jims, J&J, Jim Ross, Jim Cornette. He is a wrestling historian. Eats, breathes, sleeps wrestling. If Vince Russo is teaching me wrestling, I'm like the student at history class, either falling asleep or sitting behind the back of the class. When I'm Jim Cornette, I got my notebook, I got my pen, I'm writing down as many notes, I'm taking as many notes, many information as much as possible, because when you listen to Jim Cornette talk about wrestling, it's refreshing. He makes you feel like you're in that moment when he talks about wrestling, old school wrestling, 70s, the 80s, 90s. Hell, he even pushed New Jack, rest his soul, to do that OJ promo. I like to give a special shout out to my homeboy OJ Simpson. Two less we got to worry about. Keep up the good work. Because Jim Cornette knew and understood the politics, because after all, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, hillbilly, redneck, conservative, the type of audience that, if you the type of heel to piss off with that type of audience, that would be it. But Jim Cornette, man, he is unapologetic. He's outspoken. He and our politics are more aligned. And look, I give credit to you and my little brother for introducing me to Jim Cornette, because listening to Jim Cornette, especially with them rap videos or them rap songs, remember the videos I've sent you about with Vince Russo with them rap songs?
Oh man, Jim Cornette, man, I like. Look, I know bluntness is a lost art, but I'd rather you shoot straight with me than bullshit me. And Jim Cornette reminds me just of a straight shooter. I know a lot of people don't like that. You know, straight shooters are a lost art. You kind of got to be politically correct. You have to go along to get along, and it's a no more softer. And I'm not saying this as an insult because it is. It's more softer. It's more gentle. The world's a little bit more softer and gentle now. So people don't know how to react when it comes to bluntness. But sometimes you need that guy that's just gonna come out and just tell you like it is. Like if if something is some bull jive, you need somebody to come out and just say, this is some bull jive, we need to fix it. And no matter what spectrum that you fall up under. So, and look, I'd rather for you to shoot straight with me than for you to BS me. And so, Jim Cornette, if I could interview two guys, it would have to be him and JR, regardless of the allegations, that has recently been brought up. But I had to interview him, JR, and I have to say, well, two more other guys I'll say is Mike Today and Tony Schiavone, because they've lived through the Monday Night Wars. They went through the Golden Age. They went through a lot. So for those four guys and their wrestling knowledge and to know where it came from as far as the territories are concerned. Like I stated, I didn't realize until I got older, until I turned like 16, that wrestlers came from territory. I remember something that my mother and my father used to tell me. She was like, I remember when Ric Flair used to come down to Columbus, my hometown, every Wednesday and every Sunday and Wednesday, and that's when I started realizing, oh, that's what they mean by the territories. Territories used to be on the road constantly, and the regular everyday folk used to get to see Ric Flair and Abdullah the Butcher and people like that on a regular basis back in those days. We'll know whereas now. Last year when I went to the WWE, it had been damn near 10 years since the WWE had been in Columbus. So back in the territory days, they got more of an opportunity. The everyday person got a chance to see their favorite wrestling superstar a little bit more often. And Jim Cornette, guys like that, Vern Gagne, Greg Gagne, God rest Vern Gagne's soul. Those are guys that had seen it all. And if I could just sit down and just talk with them about how wrestling was back then, how kayfabe was back then. How did you stay in character when you knew you were at a bar? How did you know that your best friend, you got to face him every single night, but you can't be seen with him on the road? How did you combat that? How did you resist going to have a drink with your buddy at the bar, although you knew you had to face him in the next towns the next day? I would love to sit down and have those conversations because, as we all know today, wrestling has kind of lost its soul. It's more of a reality show rather than it is kayfabe. You can pretend that you don't like each other, but eventually we're going to see something on the internet. And, we can't really blame the internet for kayfabe not being, a part of wrestling anymore. We can't really blame that because there was a lot of instances on television where you had a chance to see behind the curtain, but you really didn't see all of it. But wrestling kind of lost its soul a little bit. But I would love to sit down with the old school guys, kind of like when you go into the barbershop and you talk about old school basketball, you talk about old school sports, you talk about old school football. I would love to sit down with the old heads of wrestling. I do emphasize the old heads of wrestling and really get a feel on how wrestling was, how the road was. How did they navigate through being on the road? How did it feel driving 500 miles to the next town? How did it feel staying at a flea bitten hotel because there were no motels at, the little town that you were in, that the arena only holds. Um,
Yeah, Undertaker, he talked about stories in which he had to sleep in his car.
yeah, I never forget. Taker said a story that was very, very profound. He said, he had he had tickets to the Riddick Bowe Evander Holyfield fight. He said front row. He said front row. I had a suite that I was going to stay in. I had an outfit I was going to wear. I was sitting ringside. Had everything squared away. Then Vince called me. He had fired the Warrior. He said, "I need you in Texas this Saturday." I remember thinking to myself, really? And he said, I got to that damn high school. It was only 500 people in that damn high school. And I'm thinking to myself, I could have been in the Riddick Bowe fight. I think it was somewhere near like San Francisco somewhere, but on the bottom
Probably
end of it,
probably in the
but
Bay Area, yeah.
out in the Bay Area. He said, man, I was so pissed and angry when I got to that damn arena that night. But that's,
Because I could have stayed in that fight. I could have enjoyed that fight. I was sitting front row and I
yeah,
get to show up to a high school place in which there's like what 500 people.
there's like 500 people there. So, yeah, that's, but those are the stories that I would love to sit down, take notes on, and just understand what those guys were going through before the glamour part came in. Because I remember at one point, wrestling was counterculture. It wasn't
Yes.
always popular. It wasn't always popular in the mainstream. Just like comics, like I have behind me, Spider-Man. It wasn't always popular. Grunge music wasn't always popular. Rap music wasn't always popular. I think that a lot of things were greater when they were counterculture rather than they became part of mainstream culture. I think a lot of things lose its soul once it becomes part of mainstream because then corporations get a hold of it and it loses the meaning of everything that it stood for at one point. And that's how come Seth Rollins recently came out and said a lot of wrestlers are just in it for the money at this point, which rightfully so. But as he said, there's no passion in it like it used to be back in the good old days. But I really think that Jim Cornette, with the knowledge that he brings, him being able to tell it like it is, him being able to call out anybody, don't care who you are, and
Especially what he did to Ed Ferrara after what Ed Ferrara did to Jim Ross after publicly mocking Jim Ross's Bell's palsy. Look, I understand, champ, with Jim Ross with the recent accusations against Devon Dudley. Now, we don't know whether they are true or not. That remains.
yeah,
But I had no problem with what Jim Cornette did to Ed Ferrara because you're talking about someone with a man who has Bell's palsy.
exactly. It's just like someone making fun of you. You're gonna get. He'd have got worse. I'd have came up and punched his ass in the mouth. Just being real. You'd have got worse than that. You don't make fun of people's friends and make fun of people's ailments and make fun of that shit ain't nothing. Excuse me. That stuff ain't nothing to play with. You don't make fun of anybody like that. And like I said, I don't blame Jim Cordell for what he did either. You lucky you to get right hooked. So I mean, you make fun of somebody and their health ailments and stuff like that. Bell's palsy, it leaves you disfigured. It leaves you in bad states.
Yeah, and
So
he was dealing with a lot at the time. And this was after when his mother, rest his soul, Jim Ross, passed away. And it took that much of a toll on him. And for Vince Russo, do you know what Vince Russo called Ed Ferrara? One of the smartest people.
yeah, because he wrote Duckman. I mean, which was a
But that tells you his hatred for Vince Russo, Jim Cornette. And why I love Jim Cornette is because Russo, he's an ultimate contradictor. He keeps saying, I hate wrestling, I despise wrestling, I despise the people in it and stuff. No, Vince, because you despise the people, because the people despise you because of how you treated the business. You treated it like it was a 9 to 5. You didn't care about the business. You keep trying to act as if you were the reason for the Attitude Era. You had talent. Let's not act as if you made chicken salad out of chicken shit. You had The Rock and Austin. You had Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler. You had talent. Okay, you went to WCW. You could have done something there. But you made it worse with them gimmicks, not to mention putting the belt on David Arquette.
Yeah, I will say this. You got to give credit where credit is due everywhere because the thing is, do I like Vince Russo from a wrestling standpoint? From a wrestling standpoint, no. But the thing is, those stars that were in the Attitude Era, they had to be made from scratch. Stone Cold did not have a gimmick coming in. He was used to be the ringmaster. Remember, The Rock was part of the Nation of Domination. Remember, D'Lo Brown was part of the Nation of Domination. Val Venus, you know, a lot of those gimmicks were invented and helped by Vince Russo. So you have to give credit where credit is due at a certain point in order to say, okay, you helped do that. But when it was time when you didn't have the oversight of Vince McMahon and that got taken away, then you didn't do your part. It's easy to do it. And I can't even say it's easy to do it when you have oversight because even then people have to wane you in and people have to say, well, that's not a good idea. This is a bad idea. Kind of like how you wane me in a little bit. Like, that's not really good, champ. So, when you have the oversight of a Vince McMahon, I'm not going to say it's a little bit easier because it's not. You still have to deal with bosses. You have to deal with the consequences of certain things if it doesn't work. But I will give him the credit because guess what? These were not established stars. You were building up. Like I stated, from a wrestling standpoint, Vince Russo, he doesn't get a lot of high marks. But coming from the generation, coming from new generation of the WWE, many wrestling fans that are not hardcore wrestling fans call that the lost generation because although you had a lot of great technical wrestling, you had a lot of great in-ring wrestling, a lot of people didn't consider that entertaining going from the golden era of wrestling to the new generation of wrestling, that being in the mid 90s. So he was able to put his stamp on there and turn it around and turn it into something that was not only fun, but entertaining and represented counterculture.
But here's
He
the
was
thing.
able
But
to
go
put
ahead, champ.
WWE in a position to compete with Eric Bischoff. So although people give Vince Russo a badass rap about how he viewed it as a 9 to 5, again credit has to be done because you were transitioning from that lost generation as far as the new generation to the Attitude Era that is the most to this day the most watched generation of wrestling in the world. They're still selling T-shirts off your hard work to this day.
But at the same time, champ, it does. But at the same time, champ, the reason why I don't give Russo the credit and why I agree with Cornette, those those people had that ability. They just finally needed to know when to use it. When Austin cut that Austin 316 promo, it wasn't because of Vince Russo. That was because of Austin. That was because, again, he came straight from the ambulance after that first match against that opponent. And then as he's about to go back into the arena, he gets informed by Michael Hayes, if I'm not mistaken. Michael Hayes informed Steve that Jake the Snake Roberts cut a promo. And this is at the time when Jake the Snake Roberts was a born again Christian, guaranteeing that he would win the match by bringing up the Lord. And Austin came up with John 3:16. Austin had the ability to finally say and speak in a way that he was allowed to. So I lean that more on the talent and I lean it more on the other people. And with Cornette, Russo, look at the shitty ass ideas he came up with, champ. Come on, the brawl for all. I mean, you take wrestlers out of their own element by putting them in a situation. Like Jim Cornette said, it's kind of like two drunk dudes fighting at a bar.
Yeah, but for every one bad idea, I would say the DX was good. Val Venus was good.
I give
You know,
DX, I give Val
the
Venus.
most he wrote the most highly. He wrote, you know, one of the most highly, the most viewed Raw segment in history. He did a lot. Like I stated, a lot of people you're not liked for it because the opinion of others, but you got to give credit where credit is due. Like I stated, I lived and watched New Generation Wrestling. I remember how people looked at you. Look, let's just be real at this point. And I don't like using this term, but people looked at you like a dork during the New Generation era. People called you a nerd, call you an idiot. when you watch wrestling back in those days during the new generation. When you were transitioning from that, it was a lot of different things that was going on. You know, if you really look at it, that was one of the ratings were down on across the spectrum. And he was able to help as far as build up to the point where they could compete with WCW. But so although I may not like someone, like I stated, it's kind of like I would say, let me think of a guy who I really don't particularly care for. I really can't think of any. But certain things you have to give credit where credit is due. Because guess what? You may have treated it like a 9 to 5, but if you put your all into it, if you put, look, I will say this: a lot of people treat things like a 9 to 5 because that's their job. But does that mean that they did not take it serious? Hell no, that doesn't mean it. If you took it serious,
I think Russo did, champ.
if you took it serious, if you took it serious, although you considered it a 9 to 5 and you were able to find success in it, okay, you did your part. There's a lot of people in the field that I'm in. I won't say what field I'm in. You know what field I'm in, PSP, outside of the camera. There's a lot of people that get into that injury because it's a lucrative industry. They don't necessarily have the passion for it. But you call these guys when you want to get a job done. Hey, I don't know this thing. Could you help me with it? Well, I know this. Just because you don't have the passion and you don't wake up, eat, sleep, and breathe it, that doesn't mean you don't have the knowledge for it. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of guys outside of us that don't live, eat, and sleep and breathe sports. Me and you sit on here and we scroll and we find different stories all the time. But I know guys who are smarter than me when it comes to sports, and they barely damn watch it. They could tell me what's going on. I call certain guys and they barely watch a game in baseball, but they could tell me everything that's going on. So if you've done all that you could and you've treated something like a job, that doesn't necessarily make you the bad guy. You did your job and you put your all into it. It's when you don't put your all into it, that's when the problem lies.
But the problem I have, champ, with Vince Russo, I don't think he did put all into it, and he didn't care. Not much. Very little. The thing is, he took wrestlers for granted. And look, one of the things, and you will vouch for wrestlers, you do get tired when people say that wrestling's fake or the injuries are fake.
Yeah.
Nah, they ain't fake. You can say a lot of things about wrestling. It could be choreographed, orchestrated, predetermined, a lot of things. But you cannot tell me that them injuries are fake. And
No.
Russo treated it like it was nothing. He didn't care about their mental and physical well-being. And when he left WWE, did WWE took a downfall? No.
No.
He went to WCW. And how did that turn out? Now, obviously, Bischoff had a lot to do with it for the downfall, but you can't tell me that Vince Russo made it any better. He
No.
still claims to this day that the ratings went up when he was there. But we all know that he's bullshitting. Then, on top of the fact that you put the belt on David Arquette, knowing he did not pay his dues as a wrestler.
You put it on himself.
But that shows you just how delusional and incompetent you are. I'm sorry, champ. It has to be. I mean, Booker T, it was a slap in the face because Booker T paid his dues. And he even admitted why he didn't get the title at first was because he black. I hate to. I mean, I don't like using. I mean, I know how you are with the race card and stuff, but hey, that is the
If
truth.
something is true, it's true.
And the thing is with Vince Russo, the horrible ideas, the terrible ideas you came up with WCW. Let's not forget Bash at the Beach. You claimed that if it weren't for Eric Bischoff, you would have a 100%. If it weren't for Bischoff, you would have had a great relationship with Vince Russo. How am I supposed to find that to believe when Hulk Hogan at the time had 100% creative control? How would that work?
It's an interesting proposition. But I mean, to your point, everybody's not lying. You know, when everybody says bad things about you, even Vince said at one point, there's a lot of people that kind of felt like I firmly planted uh Vince Russo.
He felt that he was mostly better than that roster in WCW.
Yeah, he said there was not like I stated, they felt like he was a plant, and you know,
And
towards
that's
the
how
end.
and that's how I feel about with Jim and that's how I feel with Jim Cornette. When the reason why I call him a babyface because anytime when you take the time to criticize and bleep on a guy like Vince Russo, I'm sorry, I love it. Because Cornette feels like how dare you? How dare you treat this profession and treat it like it's shit, like it's worthless. You don't understand the real type of wrestling. You don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. Plus, Russo still claims to this day that he was involved with the Montreal Screwjob. As Jim Cornette mentioned the quote with Bill Watts, if he was walking through a men's locker room, he'd be whistling "Strangers in Paradise."
That was that was crazy. But yeah, I gotta agree, babyface.
Because he's not afraid to say whatever he's on his mind. And look, to call out Ed Ferrara, and rightfully so for what he did to Jim Ross. And look, he was the one who convinced Mick Foley to also come back to work after the Montreal Screwjob.
Yes, indeed. I remember that, and I remember you sending me that, and you having a long, elaborate talk about it. Like I said, I call you the genius for a reason, and that's the reason why I said I don't have a problem with what he did to Eric Ferrara. Because if somebody was to say something about you, I'd probably say something that egregious about you and make fun of you about certain things in your personal life, which we will not discuss on the screen. If somebody was to make fun of you, they probably end up with a broken jaw. And trust me, I used to be an amateur boxer, so I can make it happen. So I'm just gonna be real. So
We don't want you to.
so
We don't want you to advocate violence. We
so,
don't need
well,
you to.
no, I apologize, but still, don't mess with my guys, and we won't mess with you. FO. So don't do that to people. So yeah, like I stated, I don't blame anybody for taking up for their friends. I don't advocate for violence. I don't condone violence. But if somebody messes with one of your people, I condone you sticking up for them in whatever way you see fit. That's what I condone. And if people are going to make fun of certain ailments that you have, especially something as serious as Bell's palsy, and when you're disfigured and you don't know, and you got to remember, Jim Ross got fired the first time
Yes,
he caught Bell's palsy. First time he caught Bell's palsy, he got fired in the early days. And so, for somebody to make fun of that, and then when he had another episode with it, his face was, you know, it's a strange thing. Like I said, you never advocate for violence, and I will say that you never are supposed to say anything like that or advocate for anything. But the thing is, I don't have a problem with you sticking up for your friends or your people, whatever way you see fit. If they're going to make fun of something that sensitive, do not look. I'm all for playing. I'm all for jokes. As you all know, I make fun of myself a lot, but I have a rule. Somebody has ailments, sickness, stuff like that, don't make fun of that. That's nothing to play with because, hey, you never know what somebody's going through behind the scenes in order to combat with that. They could very well be going through depression because they're not used to dealing with that. So you got to be careful with the stuff that you say and the stuff that you put in God's universe. Otherwise, it'll come back to you. Like I said, I don't condone violence or anything like that, but I'm condoning if somebody says something disrespectful to your friend or does something disrespectful to your friend, your mother, your father, or whoever, guess what? You're allowed to react to the way you see fit because it's not funny.
absolutely.